23 stab wounds. That's the number most people remember when they think of Julius Caesar. But here's the detail that changes everything. Almost every single one of those blades came from men he had personally pardoned, men he pulled out of prison, men he placed in the Senate, men who had dinner at his house the night before. Caesar wasn't destroyed by his enemies. He was destroyed by the loyalty he believed he had earned. But to understand how a man arrives at that moment, you need to go back to the beginning, to the boy who lost his father too early, who grew up in a Rome teetering on the edge of collapse, and who learned before most people do that in this world, you are either the predator or the prey. Gaius Julius Caesar was born in July of the year 100 BC in Rome. His family was noble on paper. In practice, they were aristocrats with a powerful name and an empty wallet. They could trace their bloodline back to Aeneas, the Trojan hero, and all the way to the goddess Venus herself. It was a bold claim, and Caesar would use it politically for the rest of his life. But day to day, money was tight. The name opened doors. It just didn't pay the bills. Rome at that time was a fevered place. The Republic had centuries of history behind it, but it was creaking at every joint. Two major forces were locked in permanent conflict. On one side, the populares, who championed the middle and lower classes. On the other, the optimates, the conservative elite who wanted power to stay exactly where it was, in the hands of the Senate. Caesar's uncle by marriage was Gaius Marius, the leader of the populares. That placed young Caesar firmly on the side of the reformers before he had ever done anything at all. When Caesar was 16, his father died without warning. No preparation, no transition. Overnight, Caesar became the man of the family, responsible for his mother Aurelia, his sisters, and the reputation of the Julii name. That kind of early loss either breaks a person or makes them relentless. In Caesar's case, it did both, just at different moments in his life. Shortly after, Rome's political situation grew darker. The dictator Sulla, leader of the optimates, began purging his enemies. Caesar was on the list. The reason was simple. He refused to divorce his wife Cornelia, whose family was a direct rival of Sulla's. Most young noblemen would have caved. Caesar refused. Sulla ordered his property confiscated. Caesar fled into military service, first in Asia, then in Cilicia, putting physical distance between himself and death. He was a teenager running from a dictator, surviving on nerve and on a name that still carried enough weight to keep him alive. When Sulla died around 79 BC, Caesar came back to Rome. He had a plan: become a lawyer, build a public reputation, and climb the political ladder the proper way. To sharpen his oratorical skills, he decided to sail to the island of Rhodes to study under the greatest rhetoric teacher of the age. He never made it. Somewhere in the Aegean Sea, a band of Cilician pirates intercepted his vessel. They boarded, overpowered his small escort, and took him captive. For most 25-year-olds, even noblemen, this would have been a moment of genuine terror. Not for Caesar. When the pirates told him his ransom had been set at 20 talents of silver, Caesar laughed in their faces. Not a nervous laugh, a genuinely insulted laugh. He told them they clearly had no idea who they had captured, and that 50 talents would be a more appropriate figure. The pirates, completely baffled, agreed. Caesar then sent his own people to collect the money from nearby cities while he remained on the island of Pharmacusa as their guest. Though he never once behaved like a prisoner, He bossed the pirates around. He told them to keep quiet when he wanted to sleep. He wrote poetry and speeches during his captivity and read them aloud to his captors, getting visibly angry when they didn't applaud with enough enthusiasm. He joined their games and exercises, always positioning himself as the one in charge. And from time to time, with a calm smile, he would look at them and say that when he got out, he was going to come back and crucify every single one of them. The pirates thought it was hilarious. They laughed at their strange, arrogant Roman captive. After 38 days, the 50 talents arrived and Caesar was released. He didn't continue to Rhodes. He went straight to the port of Miletus, raised a private naval force entirely on his own authority, holding no military or government office at the time, sailed back to the island and found the pirate still anchored there, fat and comfortable with his money. He captured them all. He brought them before the Roman governor of Asia, who was more interested in selling them into slavery for profit than in executing them. Caesar didn't wait for permission. He went to the prison himself, took the pirates back into his custody, and had them all crucified, just as he had promised. According to the historian Suetonius, he did show one small mercy. He had their throats cut before the crucifixion, so they wouldn't suffer as long. That story tells you everything you need to know about Julius Caesar. He was not a man who made idle threats. He was not a man who waited for someone else's approval, and he was not a man who forgot a humiliation. Back in Rome, Caesar threw himself into politics with the same intensity he had shown on that Aegean island. He was sharp, charming, and an extraordinary public speaker, qualities the Romans valued enormously. He used his legal career to prosecute corrupt officials and built a reputation as a man of the people. He spent money he didn't have to fund public events and games, going deep into debt to stay visible. In Rome, popularity was currency, and Caesar was spending everything he had to buy. By 60 BC, Caesar had climbed far enough to engineer one of the most consequential political alliances in Roman history. He brought together two of the most powerful men in Rome, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in the Republic, and Pompey the Great, its most celebrated general. Together, the three of them formed what historians would later call the First Triumvirate. It wasn't an official institution. It had no legal basis. It was a private deal between three ambitious men who understood that together they could dominate Roman politics in a way none of them could achieve alone. In 59 BC, Caesar was elected consul, the highest office in the Republic. He used the position aggressively, pushing through land reforms that benefited ordinary Romans and infuriating the conservative Senate in the process. When his year as consul ended, he was appointed governor of Gaul. It seemed like a reward. It turned out to be a launching pad. What Caesar did in Gaul over the next 8 years is almost impossible to overstate. He took 4 Roman legions into a vast territory covering what is now France, Belgium, parts of Switzerland, and Western Germany, and he conquered all of it. Campaign after campaign, winter after winter, he pushed deeper into lands that Rome had never controlled. He crossed the Rhine into Germanic territory, something no Roman general had done before, and he twice led expeditions across the sea into Britain, the edge of the known world. His men were devoted to him in a way that went beyond normal military loyalty. He promoted soldiers based on skill and courage rather than social class. He fought alongside them, ate what they ate, marched when they marched. He knew thousands of his soldiers by name. In return, those men would follow him anywhere, including, eventually, across a river that Roman law said they must never cross with weapons. The climax of the Gallic Wars came in 52 BC at the fortress of Alesia, where a charismatic Gallic chieftain named Vercingetorix unified dozens of tribes in a last desperate attempt to expel Rome from Gaul. Caesar found himself in an extraordinary tactical situation. He besieged Alesia from the outside, building a massive wall around it to starve the defenders into submission, while simultaneously constructing a second outer wall to hold off a massive Gallic relief army attacking from behind. He was surrounded. He was outnumbered. His supply lines were cut, and he won anyway. Vercingetorix surrendered, walked out of Alesia, threw his weapons at Caesar's feet, and was taken to Rome in chains. The Gallic Wars made Caesar famous across the Roman world and made him rich from the spoils of conquest. They also made the Senate terrified of him. While Caesar was changing the map of Europe, the fragile alliance holding the triumvirate together was dissolving. Crassus died in battle in the east in 53 BC, killed on a disastrous campaign against Parthia. That left only 2 men standing, and slowly, inevitably, Caesar and Pompey stopped being allies and started being rivals. The Senate, sensing an opportunity, threw its support behind Pompey and issued Caesar an ultimatum: disband your army and return to Rome as a private citizen, or be declared a traitor. Caesar understood exactly what that meant. Without his army, without his office, he would be vulnerable to prosecution by his enemies. He would be stripped of everything he had built. So, on the night of January the 10th in 49 BC, Julius Caesar stood on the north bank of the Rubicon River, a small, unremarkable stream that marked the legal boundary between his province and Italy proper, and made a decision that would end the Roman Republic. Roman law was absolute on this point. No general could cross the Rubicon with an armed force. To do so was treason. It was a declaration of war against the state itself. Caesar reportedly paused at the water's edge, turned to his officers, and said the words that have echoed through history ever since. In Latin, alea iacta est. The die is cast. He crossed. The Senate panicked. Pompey, who had boasted he could raise armies by stamping his foot on the ground of Italy, fled Rome almost immediately, heading to Greece to regroup. Caesar's advance through Italy was rapid and largely bloodless. Town after town opened its gates. When Caesar reached Rome, he walked into the treasury and took what he needed to fund his war. What followed was a civil war that stretched across the entire Mediterranean world, from Spain to Greece to Egypt to North Africa. Caesar chased Pompey relentlessly. The decisive confrontation came at the plains of Pharsalus in Greece in August of 48 BC. Pompey's army outnumbered Caesar's significantly. The Senate supporters were so confident of victory that they were already arguing over who would get Caesar's property after the battle. Caesar's veterans, lean and battle-hardened from years in Gaul, destroyed them. Pompey's army collapsed. He fled to Egypt. Caesar arrived in Egypt days later, expecting to find his rival. Instead, he was presented with a gift, a wrapped bundle delivered by agents of the young pharaoh Ptolemy the Herthian. Inside, it was the severed head of Pompey the Great, Caesar's former ally, his daughter's husband, the man who had once been the most powerful general in the Roman world. According to the ancient sources, Caesar wept, whether from grief, shock, or the sudden weight of what he had become. No one can say for certain. Egypt was supposed to be a brief stop. It became something far more complicated. Caesar found himself drawn into a dynastic struggle between Ptolemy III and his sister, the 21-year-old Queen Cleopatra Xevena. The story of how Cleopatra got her first meeting with Caesar has become legendary. Smuggled past her brother's guards, rolled inside a carpet or a linen sack, delivered directly to Caesar's quarters. Whatever the exact method, the encounter worked. Caesar aligned himself with Cleopatra, helped her defeat her brother militarily, and the two became lovers and strategic partners. She gave birth to a son she named Caesarion, Little Caesar, though Caesar never formally acknowledged the boy in Rome. By the time Caesar returned to the Roman world to finish off the last pockets of resistance, in North Africa, in Spain, he was the undisputed master of the Roman Republic. Every significant military opponent had been crushed. The Civil War was over. In 46 BC, Caesar returned to Rome in triumph. 4 separate victory parades were held in his honor. The Senate, reflecting the new reality of power, began piling honors on him at a dizzying rate. He was appointed dictator, a constitutional office that had always been temporary, meant only for genuine emergencies. But in February of 44 BC, the Senate named him Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. Caesar used his power to reshape Rome from the ground up. He reformed the calendar. The old Roman calendar had drifted so far out of alignment with the solar year that it had become almost useless. Caesar replaced it with the Julian calendar, 365 days, with a leap year every 4 years. That calendar, with one small adjustment made 15 centuries later, is essentially the one the world still uses today. The month of July is named after him. He expanded the Senate, reducing its power while increasing its size. He launched massive building projects, planned new colonies for his veterans, and extended Roman citizenship to communities in Spain and northern Italy. He was planning an enormous military campaign against Parthia, the empire to the east that had killed Crassus, scheduled to begin just days after the Ides of March. But something about Caesar's accumulation of power was beginning to unnerve even his closest allies. He was offered the crown publicly, a royal diadem, on 3 separate occasions. Each time, he refused it. He understood that Romans had an almost allergic reaction to kings. Their republic had been founded 5 centuries earlier by overthrowing a monarchy. The word king was a trigger. Caesar was smart enough to avoid the title while holding every piece of the reality. It wasn't enough. The conspiracy began forming in the winter of 44 BC, led by 2 men, Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus. Cassius was the driving force, sharp, practical, full of personal grievances against Caesar. Brutus was the soul of the operation, the man whose participation would give the assassination moral legitimacy in the eyes of Rome. Brutus was one of the most respected figures in the city, a man known for his philosophical integrity and his devotion to the Republic. He was also a man Caesar had pardoned after the Civil War and then rewarded with political office. Brutus's own mother, Servilia, had been Caesar's longtime mistress, a relationship so well known in Rome that there were whispers, probably false, that Brutus might actually be Caesar's son. Caesar trusted Brutus. That trust is what made him valuable to the conspiracy. By February of 44 BC, the conspirators numbered around 60 senators. They were a mix of former Pompey supporters whom Caesar had pardoned and men who had fought alongside Caesar and now felt overlooked or threatened. They called themselves the Liberatores, the Liberators. The date they chose was March the 15th, 3 days before Caesar was scheduled to leave Rome for his Parthian campaign. In the days before the assassination, warnings came from multiple directions. A soothsayer named Spurina had told Caesar weeks earlier that his life would be in danger no later than the Ides of March. Caesar's wife Calpurnia had terrible nightmares the night before and begged him not to go to the Senate meeting. The night before the assassination, a man named Artemidorus had prepared a written note detailing the entire conspiracy and tried to hand it directly to Caesar as he walked through the streets. Caesar took it, meaning to read it later. He never got the chance. On the morning of March 15th, 44 BC, Caesar was late. Inside the Senate chamber at the theater of Pompey, the conspirators waited, hands wrapped around hidden daggers, watching every senator who walked through the door with paranoid eyes. One of them reportedly leaned over to Brutus and whispered that everyone was talking about it. The plan was about to unravel. Then Caesar arrived. He sat in his golden chair at the foot of a large statue of Pompey. His old rival, a detail almost too symbolic to be real. One of the conspirators, Tullius Cimber, approached him under the pretense of pleading for the return of his exiled brother. He grabbed Caesar's toga and pulled it down from his shoulder. That was the signal. The knives came out. The first blow was struck by Casca, a glancing cut to the neck. Caesar grabbed the blade and cut his hand. He fought back, but then the others closed in from every direction. And in the chaos of 60 men in a confined space, many of the conspirators wounded each other as they scrambled to land their blows. Caesar was stabbed at least 23 times. He fell at the base of Pompey's statue, his body wrapped in his toga. Whether he said anything at the end is something historians still debate. The famous line, "Et tu, Brute?" comes from Shakespeare, written 16 centuries later. The ancient sources are less romantic. Suetonius says Caesar fell in silence. Others record that he may have said something in Greek to Brutus, words meaning, "You too, child?" But whatever he said or didn't say, the most powerful man in the world was dead by early afternoon on an ordinary Tuesday in March. The liberators had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They believed that killing Caesar would restore the Republic. They believed the Roman people would see them as heroes. Instead, the Forum fell silent when news spread through the city, and then it exploded in grief and fury. Caesar had always been popular with the ordinary people of Rome, the ones who benefited from his land reforms, his grain distributions, his direct, personal style of leadership. When Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and consul, delivered a funeral oration over Caesar's body in the Forum, he turned the crowd into a mob. By the end of the day, people were tearing wooden furniture from the porticos to build a funeral pyre for Caesar in the middle of the Forum. They then marched to the homes of Brutus and Cassius and tried to burn them down. Within 2 years, both Brutus and Cassius were dead. Brutus fell on his own sword after being defeated in battle. Cassius used the same dagger he had plunged into Caesar on the Ides of March to end his own life. Neither man lived to see the republic they claimed to be saving. What they had actually done was hand the Roman world to Caesar's 18-year-old great-nephew, a young man named Gaius Octavius, whom Caesar had secretly adopted in his will and named as his primary heir. History would know him as Augustus, the first Roman emperor. The republic the conspirators died for never returned. The empire they were trying to prevent was built on the ruins of everything they had done. On January 1st, 42 BC, the Roman Senate formally declared Julius Caesar a god. He became Divus Julius, the divine Julius, the man who had been a broke, noble teenager, a pirate's prisoner, a fugitive from a dictator, a general who rewrote the map of Europe, a lover of queens, a reformer of time itself. That man was now officially part of the Roman pantheon. His name outlived every empire that followed: Kaiser, Tsar. The title passed from language to language, century to century, carried by rulers who wanted some fragment of what that name represented. The month of July still carries his name in every language that uses the Gregorian calendar. The way we count our days, 365 of them, with an extra one every 4 years, is his invention. Julius Caesar spent 56 years alive. He was at various points in those years a fugitive, a prisoner, a lawyer, a debtor, a general, a conqueror, a lover, a dictator, and a god. He broke a republic that had stood for 5 centuries. He did it without ever formally accepting the title of king. And he was killed by men he had chosen to forgive in a room under the gaze of a statue of the man he had defeated. The die was cast. The die is still rolling.